Texas Pete is taking its flavor on the road with convenient, easy-to-enjoy portion control packets. Whether it's a Texas Pete dip cup or sauce packet, your customers will be able to enjoy bold flavor for a better on-the-go dining experience, anywhere, anytime. Ask your broker for the #1 portion control hot sauce or visit TexasPeteFoodService.com.
A wild week in restaurants as multiple brands change hands and major chains report their latest sales with some pretty stunning results. Welcome to Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm editor-in-chief Sam Oches, joined by my colleague Alicia Kelso. Alicia, are you alive? Holy smokes! You've been really working hard this week. There's been a lot going on.
It might have been the worst week ever.
It was tough. I mean, this is, sometimes we call earnings weeks the Super Bowl because, as journalists, we're prone to be drawn to news. But the problem is it's the Super Bowl in the worst possible way because there's just so much to cover. And it's too much. It's too much. And I would strongly urge all of you public restaurant companies, please just space this out. Space it out a little bit more because it was nutty.
Well, and save the other news. Like, can we just focus on earnings? No. I spent my birthday. It was my birthday this week.
Yeah, and happy belated. I know I said it the day of, but I want our audience to hear it too.
I spent my birthday on 4 earnings calls because that's just who I am.
Your birthday was timed poorly.
It's, but it's like, there's pros and cons to it. It's who I am, like I said.
Yeah, you're a little weird in that way, but in the best possible way for our publication.
I get it from you, Sam.
That's right. I guess I could jump right into it, although I will say I had a lovely time in New York with our colleagues this week and got to spend some time with Scott Boatwright, a CEO of Chipotle. I'm not keeping that one under wraps. I'm just going to throw it out there. He is our next signature interview coming in December. I'm very excited for everyone to hear that. And it was related, of course, to what's going on with earnings because we talked about Chipotle last week. We know that they had a pretty tough quarter, and I got into that with Scott. And I think it's important for everybody to, understand context, right? Because Chipotle took a huge hit. Their stock took a huge hit after they reported because sales were less than expectation and because traffic was down. Everybody has to normalize expectations in this economy that we're in. And as we will get into here, as we talk about everybody else who reported this week, and I appreciated it. Scott was very level-headed about it all, right? The sky is not falling, even for companies where they miss the mark and, investors are not happy. It's important to remember that things will turn around. And especially for some of these companies like a Chipotle, like a Starbucks, some of these companies have a long history of demonstrating growth and getting through some of the tough times. And, I believe that'll be true for a lot of these companies. And I believe the economy will improve eventually because it always does. It's a weird time. And it just kind of drags on longer and longer and longer. This bad economy. So I guess let's see where to start. Well, let's not start with earnings. We got to start actually with, it feels like 18 years ago that this happened, but Denny's was acquired earlier this week. Was that earlier this week?
It was Monday. It was Monday. And it was a strange experience, Sam, because we were waiting to get onto the earnings call Monday after market.
Oh, that's right.
And we were waiting. We were in the waiting room and we heard the music and I got to the point where I finally went to Twitter to figure out if I was just losing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally sent a press release out that the earnings call was delayed for like an hour, I think. So then we signed on again, and me and Joe Guskowski, our peer over at Restaurant Business, and waiting, and still we're like, something is amiss. And then we got the press release that it was acquired by a group of investors. So very interesting. I've never experienced that before.
Yeah, it kind of feels like one of those maybe 11th hour deals. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not smart enough to know how those things happen, but maybe just kind of cobbled together at the last second, and that's why they pushed it back. Some details here: acquired for $620 million by 3 investment groups, Tri-Artisan, Treville, and Yadav. Yadav, you might remember, just acquired Del Taco from Jack in the Box, taking Del Taco private, now taking Denny's private. What do we make of this, Alicia?
Notably, Yadav is also a Denny's franchisee. They're obviously a very prolific operator. And Tri-Artisan has experience. They had, some interest in Hooters, P.F. Chang's, and what was the third one?
My brain
is scrambled. TGI Fridays.
There you go.
Yeah. So this was a shock. This was shocking. I mean, it was a egregious surprise, especially like you said, 11th hour. I was at my kid's soccer practice, and it was just one of those things. So 620 million, all cash. The price, according to the companies, equates to 625 per share, which they noted was a 52% premium compared to Denny's closing price on Monday. Denny's is still down quite a bit.
Mhm.
From the beginning of this year, it is certainly not alone. Valuations have taken a huge hit across the industry this year. This is going to take Denny's private. And I was doing some research. Denny's has been on the public market, like, I think before I was even born. It's just been a really long time
Yeah.
as a public company. And so this came on the heels, I think it was in September, where Denny's started to get a little bit of activity from some activist investors
Mhm.
understanding how to do or how to expedite the turnaround effort. I know that was put into place when Kelly Valade was named CEO a couple years ago. There has been progress there. When she came on board, she cited system optimization. We're closing all these underperforming units. That there was the Kiki's acquisition in there. Kiki's has been relatively insulated against some of the bigger macro pressures. But again, this was stunning news, and the company said that this will maximize value. So apparently they received multiple offers and more than 40 potential buyers. So good for them for keeping their cards close to their chest, because I don't think any of us knew
Yeah,
this.
totally. That kind of came out of left field. You have thoughts on breakfast too, I know, Alicia, because my immediate sort of reaction to this is, okay, there's been a lot of activity in the breakfast brunch space over the last couple of years. You have a ton of players jumping into this space, but of late, you've seen some actual retrenchment. I mean, obviously you mentioned Denny's optimizing their system by closing several restaurants. We saw Maple Street just announced several closures. That's one under Cracker Barrel. And in general, I think there's been a little bit of a slowdown among these breakfast brunch chains. Do you think? I mean, you have to assume though that these investors that are acquiring Denny's see its leadership potential in that space, and the fact that you will see breakfast come back around, but perhaps they're getting it at a value now with breakfast kind of on the ropes. I don't know. What do you make of breakfast right now?
It's a great question. I think family dining, if we were to specify this category with the Denny's, and that category had an awful, awful 2024. A lot of it was driven by these legacy brands like Denny's, like Shoney's. You think of Bob Evans, just struggling across the board. On the other hand, you have these sort of sexy, more brunch focused than traditional diner kind of positioned brands like First Watch, which had a tremendous quarter. And then you've got, some of these new ones coming up, like Snooze and a Sunny Street Cafe, and so on and so forth. So I think it's just become really crowded. And I think that this is where Denny's had some challenges, is how to find its place as these sort of sexier more brunch focused concepts started proliferating. And that's why it went out and acquired Kiki's. So, I just think family dining from these legacy brands. There's a Bob Evans that closed up the street for me this week. So, that's just the story right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to take a look at. I will just tell you anecdotally, and with apologies to any friends out there who work for Bob Evans, as an Ohioan, that brand was my beloved. I mean, it was somewhere I went to all the time as a kid. And in the last 2 years, my experiences at that brand have been so bad. And First Watch is all around me now that our family goes to First Watch for that occasion that used to go to Bob Evans. And again, my apology. And they're based here, so let's break bread together and talk about it, Bob Evans. But like, it was just so obvious that Bob Evans had not met this moment where First Watch is coming in and it's great service, great food, great experience all around. And I'm really using that point to illustrate that, like, the expectation, the standard's really high in that category now. But you also simultaneously have this interesting time where Cracker Barrel, we saw what happened with Cracker Barrel when it tried to update, when it tried to kind of, I would argue, meet the moment, like I am saying that Bob Evans perhaps should. And loyal fans said, no, leave it alone. And I wonder where Denny's falls on that spectrum of, like, Denny's has a similar, I would say, fan base to a Cracker Barrel, where it's people who've been going there probably their entire lives. That's a 75-year-old brand. can you update it? Can you bring it into the future to meet this moment where so many other companies are coming in and taking market share? I don't know the answer to that, but I know Kelly Valade was trying. And I will tell you, when I sat down with Kelly for our signature series earlier this year, a lot of her emphasis, well, for starters, I think Kelly's just a phenomenal leader. And you can tell she'd put a lot of time into culture and team. And that was, I think, working very well. But there was a lot of emphasis on Kiki's. And I think perhaps they saw Kiki's as being, a little bit more of that brand that's out here and being more of a modern breakfast brunch concept to get the attention of the 2025 customer versus those folks who've been going to Denny's all their lives, which is fine. And there's a lot of value to that, but where do you go from here? I don't know. So I will be curious to see where this category, family dining, as you call it, what becomes of it. But Denny's in particular, I think, has a long road ahead of it to figure out, how it can really establish its leadership once again. It was not the only M&A news of the week or of that day, I think.
No.
I mean, because I think, wasn't it the same day we found out Starbucks sold its China business?
A half hour later.
After. We don't need to dwell on this one, but we'll get it out there for the sake of being on the record here. They sold a 60% stake in their China business to Boyu for $4 billion. We've known this was coming. We know that Starbucks wants to be able to focus a little bit more on certainly its domestic business, but try to simplify things here because there's sort of a many-headed monster that Starbucks is trying to deal with as far as what's the real problem. Being able to offload the China business to another operator was one of its goals. It has accomplished that. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Alicia, aside from just what we know from what we've been talking about. So
no, this 18-month process has ended. It is part of Starbucks' overall turnaround plan, and onward.
All right. And moving on from M&A, we also found out Yum Brands has placed Pizza Hut under strategic review. And we know what that means. That's what Jack in the Box said when they were wanting to offload Del Taco. And that happened pretty quick after Jack in the Box announced their strategic review. Del Taco was gone within the span of months. Now, it's not so easy to say with Pizza Hut and Yum Brands. Pizza Hut is one of the three pillars to Yum Brands. The other two, of course, being Taco Bell and KFC. Those three have been part and parcel with each other for 40 years. When did they come together under PepsiCo? I mean, this is going back a long time. It's been a long time. And so to hear that Yum Brands had placed Pizza Hut under strategic review and possibly considering offloading really shows you how far Pizza Hut has fallen and the struggle that Yum has in getting this massive global pizza chain back to its once prominence. I mean, we've talked about Domino's already. Domino's has experienced incredible growth. They had reported, I think, 5% in the latest quarter. Our brand icon report that we did with Domino's, I think I understood this intuitively, but I didn't know this by the numbers, which was that, back in 2008, 2009, Domino's was number 2 to Pizza Hut by maybe $2 billion as far as domestic sales go. And at the time, Pizza Hut was like $5 billion. Domino's was around $3 billion in terms of annual sales. Domino's is up to $19 billion in sales, and Pizza Hut still is at $5 billion, right? I mean, it's just insane to think about this in terms of numbers, that Domino's didn't just jump ahead of Pizza Hut, it just blew it away and left it in its dust. So you have to imagine that's a big reason why Yum is taking a good hard look at Pizza Hut right now.
It's Pizza Hut has, this under review, which potentially, like you said, could mean a sale, whether to a PE firm or another holding company. Like Restaurant Brands International doesn't have a pizza company on its roster. Inspire doesn't. Who knows where this will shake out. But it comes after a string of just ugly sales results, both in the US and international. We covered the UK Pizza Hut system, for example, just went through administration, which is basically dissolution over there. India came out with, I think, -9% and just halted growth. They said, whoop, this is really bad. We should probably halt growth.
Mm-hmm.
So Pizza Hut has just gone in a divergent direction, not only from its sister brands, which, Taco Bell and KFC make up more than 80% of the operating profit of Yum. So it can be a little bit, it can be a bigger target to be on the chopping block. It's like the redheaded, stepsister or whatever.
Or the red roofed stepsister, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really interesting, Sam. There's a lot of ownership in this brand. It is historic. It is just a stunning fall from grace from where it had that market share dominance. I think where pizza, I put something on my LinkedIn. I think I'm over 250 comments now. People have ownership in this brand. Most everybody thinks that when it got away from its core focus, that red roof, like you mentioned, the buffet, everything, those cups, the lights.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. The cups. Oh, yeah.
It's just so in this, and we were just kind of swinging back, pendulum swinging back into this nostalgic era right now. Pizza Hut had to meet the moment, though. Customers they didn't want their pizza their sit down. There were too many other options, but something wasn't keeping up with pace in terms of how they were navigating their system. Maybe they could have done more of both. I just don't know what the answer is here. I just find it really stunning that they are considering just selling this company that, to your point, is in Yum Brands' DNA.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think that is worth noting is that Pizza Hut makes their AUVs haven't budged either. So, that's where inflation is up with over 20%, 30% in some cases. And if you're still managing the same, talked on this 2019, the P&L is not the same. So that's troublesome. And that needs a strategic review in some form and, some way. Something needs to change here.
And to your point, Alicia, I mean, just a week or two ago, Pizza Hut was out here picking fights with Wingstop, as a wing thing. And it's like, what are you doing, Pizza Hut? I mean, because you're so right about that nostalgia of Pizza Hut. I cannot tell you how often this comes up in my conversations with people about, and I as a 90s kid, distinctly remember, I mean, it was after Little League games, after church, the Book It program. I mean, Pizza Hut was a part of my lifestyle as a kid in the 90s. And it was the red roof, that glass you're talking about, the lamps, the service, the dimly lit, dining room. It was Book It. I mean, come on, like the personal size pizza that I got for reading. Come on. Like, how does Pizza Hut get back to that? It's going to be a long slog. And I have to wonder if that's why Yum is finally just like, look, this can be somebody else's problem. But I do think there's so much equity in that brand that the right operator, the right company that comes in and says, we are going to give it some TLC and return it to that place and invest in that affinity that there is, the equity that consumers have in this brand. I think it could come back. But like, you have to wonder, it's like, maybe think about not competing with Domino's on the delivery front or the value front, but maybe returning to that experience of Pizza Hut that everybody so remembers from 20, 30 years ago, and just saying, like, this is our core and this is what we're going to return to. I just have to wonder, right now, we're in this moment of intense focus on value, intense focus on, digital ordering and all this stuff. And you already hear the companies talk about, well, experience is important to consumers. They're starting to prioritize experience. In the next couple of years, you're going to see that pendulum swing back away from value and more into this idea of, I'm going to spend a little bit more money on taking care of myself and having a great experience with my friends or family. And Pizza Hut is really well positioned to meet that moment. But yeah, maybe Yum is just like, that's not going to be us this time. But we will, caveat, strategic review is no guarantee. That would be a big, big, big decision and a big, big, big acquisition for any other company that's going to swoop in and take it.
Yeah. Whatever the solution is for Pizza Hut, it needs to be something that solves for this identity crisis that they're going through.
Yep, absolutely. Last in the M&A news of the week, we will mention And Pizza, Washington, D.C.-based fast casual pizza chain, acquired Tijuana Flats, a Florida-based fast casual Mexican chain that had just emerged out of bankruptcy. Noteworthy only to say, I think this was a couple years after the fact of, there was once upon a time we saw the potential of all these, smaller emerging brands kind of banding together for scale and succeeding in that way. That's kind of what it reminds me of, but maybe like 2 years after that was kind of a big thing. Maybe we see more of that. I don't know. Just noting that it was a big week for restaurant acquisitions. Let's get into earnings, Alicia. Unless it's going to give you PTSD. I don't want to give
It
you
might.
PTSD.
It might.
It was just so much. I think we got to start with the big picture because as you noted in your notes here, every single company made note of just the tough consumer situation going on right now. It's consumer sentiment. I think we have some data now that shows how much it's down. To set things up here, what's the big picture? What is this environment that we are looking at right now?
Yeah, and that was really interesting. Even companies that did well talked about consumer behaviors and consumers' pressures. Some of them got detailed about what those pressures are, notably, the SNAP pause that we're seeing. Lower income consumers have been pressured for over a year now. We started to hear this with McDonald's in the beginning of last year. Now we're just seeing the continuation, actually, the deterioration of the sentiment among lower income consumers. You have job cuts in October hit the highest level for a month in 22 years. And then, of course, we're recording this on Friday, and consumer sentiment index came in at its lowest in 3 years and one of its lowest in history as measured by the University of Michigan.
So you can't take it too seriously.
Right? Well, no, I was just pointing out the legitimacy of it.
Sure.
Just, the restaurant industry is the second largest industry in the country. They've got as firm a pulse as anyone on customers and their behaviors. And we are seeing this all over the map. I'm still pouring through all of these earnings. We had about 20 earnings calls this week, so I'm still pouring through that. But the pulse is very firm, and that is that not only are lower income consumers really hurting right now, but that's trickled into middle income consumers. One of the interesting call, of course, from the biggest call this week was McDonald's, and they actually mentioned that they're gaining traffic among higher income consumers. So just a weird, dizzying, sort of puzzle that we're moving all these pieces around. A lot of these executives noted too that they expect this environment, this pressured macro environment, to continue into at least Q1 2026. So that's worrisome. There were some positive results, but generally speaking, even the companies that had positive results are identifying that there's a little bit of a crisis among consumers right now.
Totally. We got some data from this company, Zappy, earlier this morning. And to put a point on something you just said about higher income consumers, this data point says that among those earning more than $100,000, 30% of them are eating fast food now more than a year ago. I think to your point, and so that's a very traditional scene trade down, which you might assume is going to hurt casual dining, but as we'll talk about here in a second, casual dining not doing as bad as perhaps some of the QSR brands and especially fast casual brands, which I can't make heads or tails of. It just is not following any kind of familiar pattern. But really, the point is just to say, I think across the board, it's easy to see consumers are fed up. The inflation is just the prices, everything got out of control. And when you see other trends like hiring not going as well as it should, it just all of this is a perfect storm in the worst possible way for restaurants and other businesses, other retail, to show that everybody's battening down the hatches and not spending as much as they once were. So let's get into some of the specific reports that we have here. I think let's start with the casual dining industry because, as I said, casual I think has had a few bright spots here. Texas Roadhouse continues to do very, very well. Their sales were up 6%, same store sales up 6%. Although, as you noted, Alicia, in your story about them, their profit took a hit because of beef prices. We can get into that in a little bit, but I also want to point out Applebee's sales are up. Good for Applebee's, second straight quarter that their same store sales are up. They were up 3%. And Bloomin was up across all of their brands. And so I think it's so interesting to see for, Dine Brands, owner of Applebee's and IHOP, and for Bloomin Brands, of course, owners of Outback Steakhouse. These are a couple of companies that really for the last couple of years have been on the struggle bus, but now reporting some positive results. What do we make of that? Why do we think they're doing okay in this situation?
Yeah, I think this is a theme that we've kind of touched on in the past couple of episodes and in some of the reporting that we've done. And that is that casual dining has gained share away from fast food over the past several quarters because largely following Chili's lead, just being aggressive in that marketing. Hey, we've got some value. You and I have talked about this at length, Sam, that the definition of value is significantly different than it was during the Great Recession. I think that is a point worth reiterating over and over again. It used to be about price point, and now it's not that. But when we look at the CPI, food away from home has continued to outpace general inflation and continued to outpace grocery prices. Further, limited service has continued to outpace full service. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you have these fast food companies raising prices by, let's say, 25%, and full service only raising price by 18%, the gap is closed. It's closing and it's closed. You can take the tip out of that, but you can put, that value proposition. You can totally, identify that this is more holistic value. Sometimes I don't want to cook. Sometimes I don't want to clean. And that is sometimes I just want to experience. I want a server to look at me. A lot of fast food has become kind of transactional, which has taken some of that service out of it. So I think younger consumers especially are really responding, to this point that a lot of these companies have been making. Chili's has had struck gold with its social media.
Yeah.
Applebee's has invested significantly in its social media. Hey, we've got these appetizers with all of these dips and choices and stuff for $10. And that has really resonated among a consumer set that is pressured at every stop, from heating costs to insurance costs to food costs. And they want bang for their buck because they're not getting it anywhere. And where they get bang for their buck right now is with those non-transactional players. We are seeing it. I want to make a caveat to something you said, though. Bloomin did have a positive quarter among all four of its brands since Q1 2023. I think that is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
They also announced a very aggressive turnaround plan because at the end of the day, Outback has lost some share to Logan's and to Texas Roadhouse. They're investing $50 million in Outback specifically to turn this thing around. So I think that's worthy of noting.
And where have we heard that one before? Oh yeah, it's what Chili's did 3 years ago, right? And look, as we always say, we cheer on all of these companies. We want everybody to win. But it's kind of nice to see some of these companies that have been on the ropes for the last few years, full service especially, which really seemed disadvantaged in this current climate where off-premises was taking over and value is starting to become more and more a part of the conversation. I really worried for some of these full service companies, not named Texas Roadhouse and Chili's. How are they going to get through this? Well, and I think to your point, Alicia, this idea of full service restaurants, casual dining brands especially, being a little bit more of a luxury, being a little bit more of an experience to go in and treat yourself, that occasion has perhaps not gone away because everybody being as stressed as they are, everybody being the sort of insanity of the world that we live in, people want to go in and have that nice experience and maybe relax for a little bit and being taken care of. That is still true. And they can still get that service experience from a full service restaurant versus that transactional experience, to your point, in a QSR or fast casual. I think one of the things that Scott Boatwright mentioned for Chipotle last week was how much the regular consumers were pulling back on how much they went to Chipotle. And his point was basically people are still going to Chipotle. They're just not going to Chipotle as much as they were. Well, when you have a casual dining brand, perhaps the frequency has not decreased because it was already lower frequency to begin with as a full service brand. And they're committed to that experience because it's just something that makes them feel good. And there is also real value. We saw Chili's really plant a flag in value, even if that, average check is higher than it would be at a fast casual. If you can get that $10 burger experience as Chili's is offering, yeah, you get a drink and a dessert and your check is bigger than it was at McDonald's, but you still have that more perceived value, especially because you got service and you sat down and you enjoyed yourself. So it's certainly a positive to see full service brands weathering this season as they are, and indeed perhaps doing a little bit better than some of the others. The point I would make, though, too, again, about Texas Roadhouse sales are up, but that profitability with beef prices, profitability is down. I mean, we've seen this coming for several months now, beef prices being what they were, but where you have Outback and Texas Roadhouse, all of these businesses so much built around burgers and steak, you have to imagine that the profitability could be a problem for several quarters to come.
Yeah, I think they said that beef is about 50% of the commodity basket at Texas Roadhouse. But we've heard about beef on almost every call. Wendy's talked about it this morning, McDonald's, Burger King, Shake Shack, all of Portillo's. If there's a silver lining here, it's at the Texas Roadhouse. Folks said that this is transitory. It's just a cattle cycle that we're in. It's not, ideally this will see some relief, hopefully in the, early half of 2026, but it's historically high right now. And I think that sucks because margins are already pressured amid this value environment. So it's just a 1-2 punch.
We saw it with chicken, then we saw it with eggs, and they came down.
Well, they're predicting eggs to go back up again. I got a commodities report in my inbox this morning and I just threw my hands up. I just,
It's always something. It's always something.
That's right.
Okay, well, let's move on to fast casual because we talked a bit about it. But fast casual, of course, Chipotle reported last week. And as we mentioned, Chipotle sales were only up 0.3%, which was less than expected. Their stock took a huge hit. This week, we had CAVA report. CAVA reported that its traffic was flat, although sales were up same-store sales up just shy of 2%. And that was lapping a big quarter that they had last year. Elsewhere in fast casual, Sweetgreen, big yikes, down 9%, 9.5%, traffic down double digits. And, there's so much of this narrative right now around fast casual. One term I've heard used multiple times is the sea of sameness, where you have CAVA, Chipotle, Sweetgreen, all seen as, and I hate the slot bowl comments, I hate that term, but I think what the slot bowl term is trying to get at here is this idea that a lot of the big fast casuals out there the bowl is their centerpiece, a bowl of ingredients. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. It is not slop. It is delicious still. But I think, again, the point they're trying to make here is that when you have just sort of different flavored bowls, the sea of sameness, and they're all, Chipotle until about 6-7 years ago. Gosh, I just said 6-7. Forgive me. Forgive me. You saw it right there as I walked right into it. Please, for the both of us parents of young children, put us out of our misery. I can't. Where do I go? Okay. Until 7 or 8 years ago, Chipotle had this category to itself, essentially. And so it was doing so well. Now, of course, in fast casual, there are just so many competitors. And with so many competitors competing primarily with bowls in the lunch day part, I think that's where you see perhaps some of the pinch because, you might have somebody who's like, well, on Wednesday, I go get a bowl at a fast casual. Is it going to be Chipotle or is it going to be Sweetgreen or is it going to be CAVA? I don't know. Maybe that's going on. What seems to be the problem in fast casual, do you think, Alicia?
I think fast casual is working up against a number of factors, unfortunately. I think that one is lunch hasn't fully recovered. You and I are talking to each other through our respective basements, for example. We don't go into the office. So work from home still remains pretty evident across the country. Two, I do agree that sea of sameness, but one thing that has really impacted Chipotle, especially in the recent quarters, or Chipotle fast casual in recent quarters is it has really gone after, that younger consumer. The thing about fast casual that incited a lot of its growth throughout the past decade is it, positioned itself rightfully as this sexy health, higher quality alternative to fast food. And it was targeting those younger, the younger millennials and now Gen Z. That is the demographic that is pulling back the most in restaurant visits right now. So that is disproportionately impacting, especially Chipotle, which has put a ton of marketing money, behind reaching this demographic. I mean, they just launched an app for college students specifically. So that's really impacting it. I think the third thing that we don't talk about enough that we probably need to, growth has just become difficult in fast casual. The segment is hitting maturity and we enjoyed, some staggering growth within this segment. Again, within the past 10 years, especially leading up to the pandemic. And it was pretty insulated for the most part during the pandemic because it was still on that, steep growth trajectory, fast casual is getting mature. And so, that excitement, that honeymoon phase is kind of coming to a little bit of a slowdown.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, I would not bet against fast casual. I have had this suspicion for the last couple of years that we'll see something similar to what we saw coming out of the Great Recession, where there was an explosion in this demand for high quality food at all price points. So from 2012 to 18, 19, we saw a lot of emphasis on global foods, healthier foods, locally sourced foods. And I think that was a response to what we went through in the recession, where we went through so much attention to discounting and value and cheaper price points. And that was really a heavy emphasis on QSR in particular. I think the same thing could happen. Global foods, especially, and in a lot of the conversations I have around sort of the future of the industry, there's a lot of prediction around global foods becoming a bigger and bigger part of it. We just released our de facto international issue, where we had Five Guys on the cover, courtesy our friends over at Restaurant Business. Jonathan Mays wrote this great piece on Five Guys international growth. You, Alicia, wrote a great piece on other American brands growing internationally, seeing the opportunity international. Well, Joanna Fantozzi, our senior editor, wrote a story about the international brands coming to the US, because this is kind of a great time to bring international flavors to the market, where customers are looking for something different. They're looking for something quality. And by the way, social media is driving the conversation. And what looks great on social media? International foods and flavors. And so the reason I bring all that up is to say that fast casual is the perfect vehicle for global brands, especially in just that lower price point, quick serve kind of model. And so I won't bet against fast casual, but to your point, this sort of maturity, the saturation that fast casual has reached, it will be interesting to see where this category goes beyond that. Scott Boatwright told me in my interview with him yesterday that they're still committed to this 7,000 location goal. They have not pulled back on that. They still see the opportunity to take Chipotle into more, tertiary markets, more small towns across the US. And I think it can do that because there are so many communities in this country that have no fast casual to speak of, and they will also demand higher quality foods once we get to a place where the economy is doing a little bit better and those lower income consumers can feel a little bit better about their spend. They'll demand a better product. They'll demand something like a Chipotle. Will they demand a CAVA? Will they demand a Sweetgreen? I don't know. It remains to be seen, and that's where you could run out of runway pretty quick. But I think there's always going to be something on the other side of this where, another upstart fast casual could come in with another global flavor, perhaps Asian flavors. I think that's a huge opportunity still, where if somebody cracks that code for scaling an Asian brand in a fast casual model. There's a lot of little players out there that I think could do it. But again, I'm just not betting against it. But we're seeing, a little bit of a soft period now, I think, for them because of that maturity, because of that saturation. I guess worth also noting within fast casual, Wingstop was down 5.6% in the same store sales, but lapping a really big quarter from a year ago. And then Noodles and Company actually up 4%. And back to our conversation around Denny's, this was a brand that really committed to optimizing its system, closed a lot of restaurants, and seems to be paying dividends. Anything to add to that, Alicia, just around some of these other fast casual brands and sort of the variety of results they're seeing?
Now, a lot of work on Noodles menu. What surprised me is they're doing really well in ramen, and ramen is so on trend right now, and that just seems like a perfect fit. So, to your point, yay, go.
Yeah.
Go Noodles.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point that around global flavors, Noodles is one that has done a lot of work there.
And Wingstop's same store sales being down is nothing to be concerned about. Their profit was up, I believe, almost 20%. And they've got, again, it's just that really tough lap. I think they were, 24%? Something insane.
Yeah, something insane. So let's talk about some winners here. And we have to sort of bring it back to Yum Brands, because two big winners, I think, for this quarter were Taco Bell and KFC. KFC, Alicia, how happy are you about your hometown KFC?
That's not my hometown.
Your one hometown KFC?
Too soon.
Too soon.
Yeah, +2 for KFC US.
Take the W.
It's like, you wait, because it had been since the middle of 2023 since we saw positive same store sales at KFC US, and they've put a ton of work into turning this thing around, and they brought in some really great leadership, and Scott Mizvinsky, the CEO of KFC, the KFC system, and then Catherine Tan Gillespie, who's the KFC president. She's a marketing mind. And so, one of her big directives is to make sure that KFC is top of mind again, which has become a bigger challenge than it was, just 5 years ago. The chicken category is intense, but she's breaking through some of that noise, with this comeback campaign that they launched in July. It seems to be gaining some traffic. KFC is also putting a lot of marketing dollars, about injecting itself into the value conversation where I think it needs to be. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see this progress.
Yeah, I mean 6% same store sales growth globally for KFC. Yeah, so I mean, I know you're going to be jealous about this, Alicia, but in a week, I am flying to Barcelona for our global restaurant leadership conference, which is in itself is very exciting. But one of the sessions I'm moderating is with Scott Mizvinsky at KFC, and one of their franchise partners as well. And we're talking about their international opportunity in particular, because we're meeting in Barcelona to talk about sort of the global scene. And, KFC, we sometimes could forget, but I mean, this is a brand that's actually stronger overseas than it is domestically, where, I mean, what's the crazy number? 30,000 restaurants? I mean, there's something insane, like the number of KFC locations globally.
It's like 30,000. They surpassed 30,000 last year, and they see white space, I think, to almost double that. It's just insane.
Right. And Scott being he was a long time with KFC before, but he also spent some time at Taco Bell. And, Taco Bell, there's not much more to say outside of that. That's a brand that is just, it's special. It occupies rarefied air because of this relationship I think it has with its guests, its ability to innovate and to, kind of meet that moment and, fit into customers' lifestyles wherever that is every single year. So Scott may be bringing some of that magic from Taco Bell into the KFC system. So it's exciting to see. Across the QSR aisle, however, Wendy's is another yikes. This one's fresh for us this morning, but Wendy's is down, whereas McDonald's and Burger King both experienced slight but still growth. Wendy's is not finding that same success. Why do we think that is?
Well, Sam, I'm in the middle of writing that story, so I'll get back to you.
Stay tuned.
No, Wendy's was down 4.7%. Notably, that's huge. That's not good. Mid-single digits is not good, especially when your biggest peers, McDonald's, was up 2.4 and Burger King was up 3.2. That's just not great. That's not a great place to be. But this was in line with expectations, and Wendy's has been going through it for the past several quarters. They admitted that they got a little bit too noisy on promotions. In the last quarter, they are going through some really dizzying leadership changes that I can't keep up with. But they put this Project Fresh in place in October. It's early days here.
Totally.
The biggest takeaway from that Project Fresh from the call this morning was that they are going to be closing some locations. That enhancement or
optimization. Yeah.
Optimization. And they're going to be going through this process of assessing underperforming locations to see what those locations need to make them not underperforming anymore, whether that is going to be a technology deployment or a full-on closure. Those decisions will be made in the coming months through the beginning of Q1. I think that we could probably expect about 150-ish to 200 locations to close in the near term. It's still going to grow. Wendy's is still growing domestically. They're starting to see some traction from this Project Fresh. Like I mentioned, it's early days. They don't have a permanent CEO in place. It's just this is going to be, I think, at this time next year, we're going to be talking about all the progress Wendy's has made.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
I hope. I lived in Columbus. I love Wendy's. I love the folks who work there. It's a great brand. It's just a bummer to see this waywardness, for lack of better words, especially as the QSR burger segment seems to be recovering a little bit from it was challenged in 24 too. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we've talked about with Burger King, was up like 3%. And a big part of it was by kind of just recommitting to its core, and that's its Whopper. That's what it does best. And it kind of just stuck to that. And I mean, that never goes wrong, guys. Like, I mean, I know we can talk a lot about how important innovation is, getting customers' attention, offering value, improving your experience, all these changes that you can make. But at the end of the day, You can never, ever, ever go wrong by just recommitting to what made your brand special in the first place, sticking to your core product. There's a reason some companies do well year over year over year. And it's because Texas Roadhouse is a great example. In-N-Out is a great example. Chick-fil-A is a great example. They just do not veer too far off from what makes them special. So if there's anything that can be learned in that, it is to just sort of batten down the hatches in a time like this. Do what you do very, very well, and see where it goes from there. But yeah, I'm with you on Wendy's. You guys all know I'm a big Wendy's fan. This is a place that I always love to take my son for our daddy dude times, as we call it. And I'm cheering for them, as I know you are, Alicia. All right, what else? I think we're done. You deserve a vacation. You're not going to get anytime soon.
I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm sure people are sick of me. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have to also say big thanks to senior editor Joanna Fantozzi, senior food and beverage editor Brett Thorne. The three of you guys really cranked it out this week. So big thanks to you guys. Go follow all of them on LinkedIn and all the other, and TikTok and everywhere, because if you want this fire hose on you like it's been on all of us all week, by all means, go follow us, because you'll get it all. But that's all we have for this episode of Extra Serving. As always, Alicia, thank you. We'll talk to you next time.